Oh, okay, yeah. So these are the 6 points that I'm going to focus during this presentation. I hope I could cover all of them. So let's see, fingers crossed. First, studies on philanthropy often neglect the role of women, whether as donors, activists, and also beneficiaries. On the other hand, studies on poverty often mention that women are the most vulnerable parties who have to carry its greatest burden. Some studies also suggest that during the early days of Islam and early modern period, women were prominent in philanthropic activities. Study by Zainab Said Menchutek, for example, she mentioned the early female Muslim philanthropists that have become the role models of many Muslims. The first one, of course, Khadijah, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad. So besides her status as the mother of the believers, she's also known as businesswomen and also a philanthropist. And then there's also Queen Zubaida, the wife of Caliph Harun al-Rashid from the 9th century. And then the very famous one, there is Fatima al-Fihriya from Morocco, who built Al-Qarawiyyin Mosque in the 9th century. Gregory Kolosky also mentioned that in the early modern period, royal women were prominent as the founder of and also custodians of awqaf endowments. So, and then on the other hand, studies on philanthropy in the modern period often mention Muslim women mainly in their capacities as beneficiaries of philanthropy. Kozlowski, for example, argues in the modern period, women are no longer prominent as ladies bountiful, but primarily as the beneficiaries of male largesse. Kota Kunumal, in his work on the image of charity in the print media in South India, also argues that women are mainly depicted as the objects of the sympathy of philanthropists. Interesting to mention, however, is a recent study by Nora Derbal. She focuses her study on Saudi Arabian women's philanthropic work and how their activities, which have led them to be present in the public sphere, has been tolerated due to the widespread assumption that philanthropic work fits with the officially propagated image of the ideal Muslim women. As wives and mothers, Saudi women might commit themselves in the charitable sector to the Saudi family and its children beyond their own household. But that's the case of wealthy Saudi Arabian women. So what about the role of Muslim women in developing countries when we talk about Islamic philanthropy, such as in Indonesia? So my paper, oh my God, yeah, I play with this one, sorry for that. So my paper focuses on women in the broader discussion of humanitarian acts in Indonesia. It analyzes the position of women, whether as donors, activists, including volunteers. So in doing this phenomenon will then be examined by taking consideration of the line of trajectory of charity networks between Indonesia and also the Middle East. In terms of methodology, my study relies on ethnographic data that I collected in Jakarta from 2017 until now, and also with the additional data from my research in Hong Kong in 2012. Looking at the development of philanthropic work, the widely spread assumption is the role of Gulf-based charities in helping poor Muslim countries. So the common assumption of the line of philanthropic trajectory has been from the Middle East to Asia. Many studies have mentioned Seoul, Laisel, and Benthal's edited volume also mentioned this one. And Indonesia is considered as one of the beneficiaries of these Gulf-based charities. These are the pictures of the Qatar Charity Foundation when they just launched a program of building housing complex for an educational institution in Indonesia. Great. Uh, then we move on to the since the explosion of oil prices in the 1970s and the flow of money from Gulf countries basically could be seen flooding Indonesia. The flow of money could especially be seen to support da'wah activities, Islamic proselytization, and especially the establishment of mosque and also the establishment of educational institution. Saudi Arabia, for example, who is known as the world's largest donor of humanitarian assistance outside the Western donors, has been active in channeling their oil wealth to Indonesia to spread their Salafi teachings of Islam. The establishment of Ma'had al-Ulum al-Islamiyah wal-Arabiyah, the Institute for Islamic and Arabic Studies in Indonesia, for example, and also scholarship that they give to Indonesian students, demonstrate their commitment or their contribution to the development of Islam in Indonesia. And so what about then in terms of gender issues? I would like to share my experience. When I started researching that topic on this women philanthropy and also the Middle East charitable work in Indonesia, unfortunately, I couldn't find significant issues relating to gender and also the Middle East charitable work in Indonesia. Yeah, there are some reasons behind the lack of focus of this Middle Eastern charitable work on gender, especially women. The first one, to date, the establishment of mosque has been the most often targeted charitable domain for Middle Eastern donors. From 2004 until 2016, for example, Qatar Charity Foundation, Hilman mentioned this one, had 785 mosque projects. So they built mosque and this, of course, has been very helpful to accommodate the rising religiosity in Indonesia. Besides that one, there's the establishment of orphanages, as mentioned by Hilman. It's also quite notable. Again, Qatar Charity, up to 2016, they had helped 2,446 orphans in Indonesia. So it's quite a lot. And then the other reason is because donor support from these countries is usually bonded with their own agenda and also ideology. So then what about the women's empowerment? Is it possible then they channel their funding for women, for the programs relating to women's empowerment? I have this very interesting statement by one of my informants. She's the leader, the female leader of a pesantren. She mentioned that we face some difficulties in finding muhsinin donor who can help us build asrama housings for the students of Islamic boarding school, let alone asking them to fund women's empowerment activities. They focus mostly on helping Indonesia to build mosque, because building mosque is mentioned in the Quran, or orphanage, as also Hilman mentioned in the Quran, whereas building housing for students or helping women's empowerment are not explicitly mentioned in the Quran. So that makes everything become a little bit tricky to really find the money from the Middle East that really focus to projects relating to women's empowerment in Indonesia. So this is one of the, she's the student from one of the Salafi, Saudi-funded Salafi institution in Tasikmalaya. The picture. Next. So this phenomenon might lead us to question whether the focus on helping women is especially absent from the agenda of Gulf-based charitable work. Aid dedicated to women, of course, is not totally absent. However, usually aid for women is lumped together under the rubric of family. Qatar Charity Foundation, for example, it has childcare, women and family program, and also livelihood dedicated for women. So This phenomenon indicates their understanding of the donors' understanding of women's main role, namely, based on the biological aspect. So for them, for many of these donors, the way they understand the position of women is just women's natural responsibility is basically taking care of the family. Again, stories from my field, my field work. In 2010, I visited an Islamic boarding school established by a medical doctor, Dr. Irianto, who was a member of ISIS and left Indonesia and was reported dead in 2015. So when I visited this pesantren, the staff of the pesantren informed me that usually if the donors from the Middle East come, if they bring their wives, then their wives usually will give face veil or face covering to the students and also the staff. And when the prospective donors know that the pesantren obliges all female students to wear face covering, this pleased them. So they feel like they really need to help this pesantren with the same kind of ideology. And this also, this kind of story also, I found it during my research in Ihya as-Sunnah, a pesantren founded by the student of Sheikh Muqbil bin Hadi al-Wadi in Yemen, in Tasikmalaya. It's the same. They said that usually when Mashaykh knows that the pesantren, that our pesantren, the Nyai, the female leader, told me that the wife of Abu Qatada, the wife of the Kiai, told me that usually when the Mashaykh know that we ask the female student to cover themselves properly with the face covering, they are very happy with this kind of condition. So then these two cases basically solidify the general kind of pattern that beneficiaries are expected to follow the donor's ideology. And in the context of Muslim women, beneficiaries need to follow in the context of the discussion of Muslim women, the beneficiaries need to follow the donor's ideal image of Muslim women based on the donor's understanding. And so Gulf-based, these are the students of Abu Qatada's pesantren that I visited, and they got funding from Ihya at-Turaf from Kuwait. And so Gulf-based charitable works lack focus on women's empowerment and also gender issues has led my research to see Indonesian-based philanthropy agency to explore whether they are concerned with this issue. So then I take two case studies, one from Dompet Duafa and the second case study from ACT Aksi Cepat Tanggap. Dompet Duafa, Amelia has mentioned this one a lot, and Dompet Duafa was was established by the journalist of Indonesian Daily Republika, initiated in 1993. And I won't cover the detail about Dompet Duafa. Throughout its development, Dompet Duafa has shown diverse achievements. Amelia has mentioned this one, has just mentioned this one. So let's see Dompet Duafa's work or programs relating to women. Dompet Duafa's main objective of establishment is to be an Islamic movement for global empowerment, meaning that they don't want to focus or have a higher priority on certain kind of on one gender. So for them, they just have to assist men and women. And one of the Dompet Duafa staff mentioned that I often say to my colleague that we are not supposed to be trapped in the feminist agenda that we have to empower women. However, looking at their programs, we could see that they have a great concern relating to women, and especially they also understand that the position of women in developing countries who are often vulnerable to diverse type of abuse, especially the double burden of poverty, then that has become one of the main concerns of the Dompet Duafa. So so let's see Dompet Duafa's commitment to empower women. One of the example of their commitment to empower women, the first international branch of Dompet Duafa was founded in Hong Kong in 2004. Hillman in his paper has also discussed this one. So basically the project is dedicated to help the Indonesian migrant workers in Hong Kong, give them advocacy programs, and also not on Dompet Duafa also aims at preparing these workers to be successful during their contracts in Hong Kong, and also prepare them to be empowered upon their return to Indonesia. They organize vocational training such as English course, computer skill course, beauty skill course, and cooking. And this one is the flyers. This one, it shows how the information about how to calculate zakat on salary, on their monthly salary, this migrant workers' monthly salary. So I just want to focus on this one. There is this one program by Dompet Duafa in Hong Kong called Majalah Iqra program. Majalah Iqra is actually Dompet Duafa called this one as a laboratory, writing laboratory. Majalah Iqra is a bulletin, it's a magazine, monthly magazine. In this magazine, basically Dompet Duafa tries to encourage these Indonesian migrant workers to be able to write. And it has been very successful because many Indonesian migrant workers have successfully published their work, articles, and also poetry, not only in Indonesian magazines, but also Indonesian newspapers in Hong Kong and also in Indonesia. So that's one of the, but it's also important to note that this kind of programs might lead us to assume that, okay, Dompet Duafa, they try to support the agenda of feminists for gender equality and that kind of stuff, but they really emphasize, as one of the elite mentioned before, they really want to emphasize, no, we are not, we are different from the feminists, we are different, our work different from the women's activists. We don't want to single out one gender to channel our funds. And the last, there is in Indonesia lately, they have this new project called Khadijah Learning Center, named after the wife of the Prophet Muhammad, Khadijah. This Khadijah Learning Center, the aim of the establishment of Khadijah Learning Center, it's very, this one, is as a training center to produce 1,000 successful Muslim businesswomen, pious businesswomen like Khadijah. What we can see from this program is that this kind of program is resonant to what Mona Atia in her book Building a House in Heaven mentioned, that there's the rise of business practices within Islamic charities. Mona Atia also used the term neoliberalism. There's this rise of the emerging phenomenon of pious neoliberalism. And so in this training center, the women will basically will be trained to be not only to be a good Muslim women, but also to be successful business women like Khadijah, the wife of the Prophet Muhammad. So that's the story of Dompet Duafa, and then let's move on to the story of ACT, the second case study. ACT was basically initially the Dompet Duafa's division focusing on disaster relief, but then it became a separate foundation in 2005. ACT also has been very active in trying to help women, although it's the same like Dompet Duafa. They don't want to use use the term gender equality. They don't want to use the term, or they don't want to also even collaborate with feminists and women activists, because for them, when they help women, that's because it's just they are very vulnerable. Not because of the gender equalities project. What I could see from the ACT is ACT tries to introduce the culture of giving to urban young middle-class Muslim women. In my other research on da'wah and also da'wah social media and youth, I often met ACT staff in that events, and then basically what they were trying to, these are just the two events that that ACT was also present. The first one is in 2016, there's this big event by the hijaber community in Indonesia. ACT was there, and they were there to introduce to these young Muslim women the condition of Muslim in Syria. And then usually after the presentation, then they will invite this young Muslim to donate their money. And then the second one, there's also another event that I met. This is the event organized by face-veiled Muslim women. I met the ACT people too there. And then when I was, that one, the event was for the soft opening of this face-veiled Muslim women boutique. So they are selling face covering, and they are selling the abaya, the long dress. When I asked the ACT member, they said that they really need to also include them, these women, to be aware regarding the condition of Muslims in Rohingya at that time, in Rohingya. So they presented something about Rohingya, what Muslims faced in Rohingya. So these two things, then yeah, although the donation from, of course, from these female urban youth would not be as large as those of other donors, such as companies fulfilling corporate social responsibility, ACT is active in introducing their programs to female urban youth due to their belief that these women could be the next activists and also volunteers and also donors who could strengthen ACT team and its humanitarian work not only in Indonesia but also internationally. And so ACT is also known as their eagerness to really support or propagate this digital philanthropy. So they are very active in social media platform. And women are basically the main constituent in this digital philanthropy. So ACT worked together with women, and then as you could see from, they use diverse social media platform. On Instagram, ACT has the largest followers comparing to other Indonesian philanthropic agencies. It has lots of followers on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Twitter. And many of their followers are women, basically. So here again, we could see women not only as the beneficiaries, but also as volunteers, as an activist of philanthropy, and also as donors. As the conclusion, yep. So, as a conclusion, the presence of the most common assumption regarding aid flow in the Muslim world is usually the presence of Gulf charities in their co-religionist countries, in particular developing Muslim majority countries such as Indonesia. However, usually this funding managed in a reactive manner. As we could see from the case of Hilman's paper, for example, like the establishment of orphanages in Aceh after the tsunami. Qatar Charity in Indonesia, for example, it was established in 2005 and legalized in 2006, and that one is as a kind of response, the Qatar Charities respond to what happened in Aceh. And lacking of professional professionalism too. That's also that's one thing. And the other thing is that Gulf-based charitable works lack of focus on women's empowerment, I mentioned before. But when we see what happened in the country, there's this Dompet Duafa and ACT, we could see that they try to focus, they try to maximize their way, their effort to really optimize Islamic charity potential in Indonesia to empower women. And this program, the programs also reflect their understanding of women's role, the programs by Dompet Duafa and ACT, but they still have this kind of conservative understanding of women's role too, that domestic duties are women's main responsibility. And last slide. So we could see here from my presentation the visibility of women, not only as beneficiaries, but also as donors, activists, and volunteers. Women are important agents in helping end the circle of poverty. Dompet Duafa and ACT remain reluctant in moving, however, they remain reluctant to moving further by supporting the gender equality agenda or by working with women activists in Indonesia for gender equality. The programs offered by Dompet Duafa and ACT also reflect the trend, the increasing kind of trend of pious neoliberalism in Islamic charitable practices. Last one, the professionalism of the two organizations, Dompet Duafa and ACT, have also given birth to a new generation of young, well-educated, female tech-savvy women who have a strong commitment to charities. So stop there. Thank you very much. Thank you.
The Kuwaiti charity sector or charity industry is perhaps the largest in the Gulf compared to the number of the population. Kuwaitis are very active in donating and carrying out relief work. Also, the Kuwaiti Emir in 2014 was named or awarded with the title of Qaid al-Insaniya, or the leader of humanitarian work by the United Nations. And well, I mean, I also have to mention it here that so being active in charity increases someone's political authority in Kuwait. Also, since the, and I'm going to talk about this, since the 2010-11 political turbulences in the country, well, being active in charity also helps to boost the legitimacy of the emir on the political field, because the opposition, members of opposition, some of the opposition streams in the country accuse him of breaching the 200 years old social contract. Of course, it's not happening openly, but you can hear such things if you visit Diwaniyas, and it was especially prevalent around 2012, 2013. So let me give you a bit of background of how Kuwaiti charitable organizations are linked to the local political dynamics. So Kuwait is a quite unique case in the Gulf. You have some sort of democracy in the country. So the political system is based on a balance between the ruling family, Al-Sabah, and the parliament, which is called Majlis al-Ummah. And in this parliament, usually you have diverse political grouping, which reflect also the social cleavages. Now, the Al-Sabah strategy of ruling is basically a kind of divide and rule politics, which means that they try to balance these political forces, sometimes supporting one of the forces against each other, and another time making alliance with someone else, and basically keeping the country stable in this way. For instance, in the 1960s to the 1980s, the main political cleavage was between the rulers and the Arab nationalist groups. Then to actually balance the Arab nationalists, the rulers, for instance, naturalized about 200,000 tribesmen. Well, currently in the past couple of years, after 2011, there, like a kind of quite colorful opposition emerged, which pushes to more participation, more democratic reforms, and the other end of the equilibrium is the government, the ruling family, and their supporters. Now. All right, I'm going to skip this. So how charities? I think I should say a few words about this. That in the 1970s and 1980s, also the government gave both financial and political support to the emerging Islamic movements in the country, namely first to the Muslim Brotherhood, for instance. They banned the Arab nationalists' main umbrella organization, the so-called Independence Club, or Nadi al-Istiqlal, and at the same time they supported the Muslim Brothers to strengthen their infrastructure and their umbrella organization, a charity which is called Al-Islah Society, or Jama'at al-Islah al-Ijtima'i. And at the same time, for instance, first time in Kuwait history, in 1976, the Minister of Religious Affairs became a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. But at the same time, the rulers also wouldn't prefer that the brothers completely dominate the Sunni Islamic scene of the country, so they provided support to the nascent Salafi movement. For instance, in 1981, one member of the ruling family, Sheikh Fahad al-Ahmad, provided a large chunk of donation to the Salafis to establish their charity organization, Ihya Turath al-Islami. The Islamic charities started to build and strengthen their transnational linkages in the 1980s during the Afghan war, because there was actually a wish to donate, and both the Muslim Brotherhood's charity and the Salafis set up headquarters in Pakistan and helped the refugees who arrived from Afghanistan. Now, sorry. Oh my God. All right. So I'll try to actually explain how in Kuwait the charity organization can be linked to a political party or political organization. In Kuwait, officially there are no political parties, but in reality or in practice they are functioning. The Salafis, actually one faction or branch of the Salafis maintain a quasi underground organization, but everyone actually knows about it in Kuwait, which is called Al-Jama'a Salafiyya, and they have a political wing which is of course open, which competes in parliamentary elections. This is called At-Tajammu' Salafi al-Islami, or a Salafi Islamic group, And at the same time, Jama'ah Salafiyya also possesses a charity wing, which is Ihya Turath, which I just mentioned before. Now, in Kuwait, electoral success often translates to political positions, although the government is not elected by the members of the parliament. But let's say if a given faction has a significant presence in the parliament, so often the same faction receives ministerial positions or top government jobs in the different governmental institutions, and at the same time also allying to the ruler can help to get appointed to these governmental positions. Now the post 2011 era was kind of favorable for the Salafis who gather behind Ihya Turath al-Islami. In 2011, protests which were partly inspired by the ongoing demonstrations in the Middle East led to the resignation of the government of Nasser Mohammed, and a quite broad opposition emerged in the country. Now, the so-called Jama'ah Salafiyya, which is actually also often in Kuwait just labeled Ihya Turath, from actually the charity, split into three factions. So one faction is a so-called pro-government faction. They stand with the emir, and they have a quite harsh position against the opposition. There is an opposition faction which is called, which is led by the veteran parliamentarian Khalid Sultan bin Isa, and also there is a third stream or faction which also completely left this community, which they don't have an explicit name, but I call them the Quietists. They they still support the government. They say that actually revolting against the ruler of a Muslim country is not permissible religiously, but at the same time they don't support the pro-government branch of Al-Jama'ah Salafiyya, because they call that they have they play a kind of Machiavellian game, and this by associated with the pro-government faction of the Salafis. Was rewarded by the ruling family by receiving ministerial positions. For instance, one of the leading figures of the Salafis of this group, Ali Al-Umair, became first oil minister and then Minister of Public Work, which is important to understand the dynamics of charity field in Kuwait. Is that the Salafis started to replace the Muslim Brotherhood in the so-called Islamic institutional sector in Kuwait, which is comprised by the so-called Beit al-Zakat, which is the public zakat fund of Kuwait, also in the Ministry of Religious Affairs, and the Awqaf Public Foundation. I don't know if I translate it well. Al-Amana al-Amma لإدارة الأوقاف. This is the translation, the official title, what I found in the website, but I mean, it's not the exact translation. And at the same time, perhaps most imams of mosques who were appointed by the Ministry of Religious Affairs also belong to the Salafi movement. Now, how these positions in this Islamic sector increases the capabilities of Ihya Turath al-Islami to create new transnational linkages, expand its transnational networking. Well, one thing is that, which actually the members of the charity told me, that the government yearly organizes a number of Islamic conferences where they invite sheikhs, religious scholars from abroad to visit Kuwait, maybe present something in this conference. And they managed to actually push the Awqaf Ministry to invite a quite large number of Salafis. So this gave a platform of networking for Ihya Turath. So they told me that due to actually these networking activities, they established, not too large, but established presence in New Zealand and also in Morocco. The director of Bayt al-Zakat, or the Public Zakat Fund, Ibrahim al-Saleh, is also a Salafi. Now again, of course, quite many Salafis were hired and replaced members of the Muslim Brotherhood in Bayt al-Zakat. It doesn't mean, of course, that now Bayt al-Zakat is like explicitly pushing funds to Salafi organizations, Salafi groups, or directly to Ihya Turath. It's mostly like Ibrahim Saleh is of course member of. I mean, he's also. He has transnational contacts. He has contacts in other countries. So Salafis, let's say from Southeast Asia or from other countries, started to visit him personally, ask him for help, ask him to support financially the local NGOs. So this all goes back to interpersonal networks. At the same time, the Ministry of Religious Affairs also has charity activities like supporting and also building Islamic centers in several countries of the world. And well, it seems that it's also Salafis in a way benefited from this connection or from their presence in the ministry. And what I observed personally is that since the Salafis established presence in the Kuwaiti state institutions, they managed to expand their networks in Cambodia and Indonesia. And let me just say a few words about Cambodia, because I had several personal observations there. Ihya Turath has in the country, Albert already talked about Cambodia, so it has about 4 to 5% Muslim minority, a few 100,000 people. Well, Ihya Turath established about 30 plus boarding schools in the country, and also hundreds of preachers receive some sort of support from them. Now, recently, an Islamic hospital was, for instance, built in Cambodia, not exclusively by Ihya Turath, but actually the Ihya Turath carried out the plan from the funds what it received from several other charities within Kuwait and also from the Emiri Diwan. Also, Ihya Turath provided fund to expand the female branch of this boarding school network. There is one center which is now being expanded quite heavily in Tabung Mum province in Cambodia, and they recently built two female boarding schools in the southern Kampot province. And well, I'll stop here and looking forward to the Q&A session.